I'd now like to introduce Nicholas Boy-Smith, Chair of the Office for the Place Advisory Board. Nicholas is the founding director of Create Streets, a social enterprise encouraging urban homes in terrace streets, not multi-storey buildings. He is a member of the Historic England Commission, an academician of the Academy of Urbanism, and a senior research fellow at the University of Buckingham, where he leads their course in applied research in urban design. He is a member of the government's design review panel and the estate regeneration panel chaired by Lord Heseltine. He is an advocate for design codes and a gentle density approach to development. Currently chair of the new Office for Place Advisory Board, he is cited as the person, more than any other individual, with the government's agenda to improve the design of new homes and places. Nicholas, it's a pleasure to have you here. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Second. I asked a friend how I should talk to a room full of architects this morning. He said carefully, so I hope I'll be as careful as possible. Thank you to the Minister, I think he's now left, for mentioning my favourite architect, Nicholas Hawksmoor, not just because we've got the same first name. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 years ago yesterday, the Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission, which was hard to say, presented our findings to a packed audience beside Lambeth Palace. When we had begun our labours 12 months previously, some asserted that our task was without purpose and our aims without merit. However, I think in a twist to the story, our proposals were greeted actually with near universal support. One Stirling Prize-winning architect wrote, "I'm finding myself agreeing with almost everything," which is a surprise. The then chair of the Academy of Urbanism, who's actually sitting down there, called it an unexpected joy. From controversy, consent. A pluribus unum. What had happened? What had happened, I hope, was that calmly, reasonably, and I hope empirically, we had reviewed the quality, popularity and sustainability of the places we create and had found them wanting. People who wrote into us said so. Focus groups around the country said so, and polling. Pricing and behavioural analysis said so. And frankly, most of the professionals we spoke to said so. This is a report from UCL. In 2021, the government followed the... Ooh, crikey, that was meant to... What's happened there? That didn't go right. In 2021, the Commission the government followed the Commission's recommendations, and I've totally... No, the pat's missing, so everything's gone wrong there, and published the National Model Design Code, which is a superb document which I commend, and which David Rudlin will be discussing shortly. The changes to the National Planning Policy Framework the same year also included many of our recommendations to set beauty as an aim to the planning system, to demand enhanced biodiversity from every development, and to strengthen councils' ability to reject proposals which are ungainly or unsightly. Major themes in both documents included the need to regreen our streets and squares, to rejuvenate our streets' vitality as places to dwell, not just roads to rush through, to make planning more visual, less verbal. Government wisely relaxed regulations on street dining during the COVID epidemic and required the planting of street trees in new streets, following the very firm evidence that they're associated with fewer accidents, greater health, more walking and cleaner air. And this is starting to make a difference. As research by Matthew Carmona has shown, the odds in favour of local planning authorities winning cases on design grounds have shifted from 5 to 7 against to 13 to 7 in favour. And this scheme will, thankfully, not now see the light of day, thanks to that. I'm sorry if anyone responsible for it is in the room. A few councils are starting to raise the expectation bar as well. Surrey, for example, now has a street design guide focusing on place quality, greening up, and street trees in a way that would have been impossible a few years ago. Meanwhile, thanks to superb work by officials and the expert board that I chair, thank you all of you widely and deeply, we have carefully, cautiously, at an appropriate governmental pace, been setting up the Office for Place as a newly independent body to help councils lift the bar by creating and commissioning training, by producing tools, templates and processes that councils and communities can freely access and adapt and apply, by commissioning and undertaking independent research into popular placemaking, by sharing good practice, by creating a system of accreditation for design codes and other tools, by starting to advise government, and by understanding empirically the relationship with between place with neighbourly prosperity, sustainability and health. Ultimately, our collective vision, Office of Place, government and I hope all of you, must be to help families, neighbourhoods, parishes, councils, landowners, house builders and developers easily and more seamlessly to create places in which the body can prosper and the soul sing. The British design and development industry should be the best placemakers in the world. Someone's got a bad cough at the front there. Aided by the improving data on the discoverable links between place with good outcomes for humans and for planet. Because we know from our research that too many of the lives our fellow citizens lead are damaged by poor places. No friends around the corner, less sense of community, less walking, less local pride. And you can measure this in shorter lives, in poor air, in lost trust, in more opposition to house building. Over several generations, the innate instinctive response, and we all know this, of most British people is that new housing will be bad. That's the gut feeling until they're persuaded otherwise. Will be imposed from elsewhere, will be careless of the landscape and the local, of the precious and the particular. 2% of people trust developers, 7% trust planners. It's time to move, I think, from a vicious circle of poor development and opposition to a virtuous circle of regenerative development, with clearer quality asks and clearer expectations and beliefs from neighbourhood and community. Let me say this unambiguously. We must dare to ask communities what they like and how they wish to live. We need to keep it simple and make use of the exciting possibilities of digital engagement. We should aim to create the conservation areas of the future, combining the best of the old with the new, cherishing the past but embracing the future, fast Wi-Fi but safe cycling, beautifully textured streets which somehow feel as if they've always been there, overshadowed by the trees which really have. Now, as some of you will remember, 20 years ago, the late Lord Rogers proposed an urban renaissance. His task force rightly argued that Britain's towns should be better places. His argument was strong. It's led to many important improvements. It led to CABE and improvements in cities like London and Manchester. But it was not complete. And some subsequent development visions have made a naively unnuanced argument that high-density development is the future and the answer to all our housing needs. But the broad mass of the British people has rejected this vision. Like the vast majority of people in all countries, they seek the joys of the garden suburb, the place to call your own, the places which, even when they are communal, are not official, the pub, the back garden, the fireside, and the nice cup of tea, as George Orwell fortuitously put it 70 years ago. The most popular form of development in this country, statistically and in pricing data, as nearly everywhere, is the private house. People consistently want space. However, as you don't need me to tell you, this very understandable desire for space is not without consequences. Sprawling suburbs need a lot more countryside to build upon, nor in its most elongated variant is it very good for residents. In multiple surveys, sub-suburbs are associated with knowing fewer neighbours and with less active, less healthy lifestyles, nor are homes which rely upon miles of new roads to get anywhere the affordable, sustainable future to which I believe we should aspire. So we need to find a middle way between the extremes of lumpish blocks crammed into small urban sites on the one hand and low-density sub-suburbs on the other. Fortunately, according to the growing research on place and well-being, there is an answer that very often works. I call it gentle density, a network of beautiful streets and squares, of mansion blocks around real middles, a village green or a local corner shop, tree-lined avenues, streets that children can safely walk along, beautiful houses that cherish and evolve the local vernacular and nestle thoughtfully in the landscape. Blocks with clear backs and fronts, which are associated quite clearly with lower crime and better use of little and often green space. Such places tend to be more popular and more prosperous. No one ever complained that a town has too many squares. And people provably respond more warmly, innately and organically to streets which have coherent complexity, colour, texture, and whose slides and whose form and features invite you to walk or mimic, however imperceptibly, some of the patterns of nature. The scientists call it biomorphism, as I'm sure you know. Gentle density is also part of the answer, to levelling up, fixing the road belt scars in too many of our towns, and they are typically in the poorer towns. The digital revolution can make the towns left behind by industrialisation viable economic centres again, and making use of existing infrastructure, not just pouring houses into a field. Now, the places of the future will not be the same as the places of the past, but they will rhyme, more confidently integrating, I hope, trees and plants into the town, preserving hedgerows or green corridors running through new settlements, creating allotments, Again, provably popular and good for us. The natural kingdom, as the Minister said, has a place in the urban realm. And the good news is, actually, I think already, thanks to changes in the NPPF, we're seeing a very clear change, certainly from the developers that we work with on this. The good news also, and there's hopefully a lot of good news, is that the types of places that people find homely, safe and beautiful are, all the polls and pricing data tell us, fairly consistent by age and sex, wealth and race, region and politics. The types of place we live in, knowing your neighbour, feeling at home in the world, knowing that your children can move safely around their neighbourhood, are not partisan passions. We can all agree on this. Fast roads, bad air, overlarge facialess buildings, featureless facades are not the settled preference of the British, or pretty much any people, and this is why you rarely see them in the most expensive neighbourhoods. Critically, and I really want to stress that, hang on, okay, I think I've lost a slide there, the slide's been taken away from me, it doesn't matter. Critically, hang on, let me just see. Oh, there we go. Critically, creating beautiful places is to build sustainably. Ugly buildings rarely outlive their primary use, but beautiful buildings transcend their first transitory purpose and sail on into the future. The Edwardian power plant turned into a cafe. The medieval barn turned into an art gallery, which I got to a bit too late. The ground floor of a terraced house turned into a shop, and then perhaps an office, and now a home again. Resilient and successful places flex their uses easily over the centuries, and in doing so, their whole life carbon cost collapses. Constructing a new build two-bedroom house uses the equivalent of 80 tonnes of CO2. Refurbishment uses 8 tonnes. Even with the highest green efficiency specification, a new build would take over 100 years to catch up. Let me finish, my slides are working and behaving again, thank heavens. Let me finish on what I hope is a constructively provocative note. We did not used to be afraid, ladies and gentlemen, of the concept of beauty. The great Octavia Hill wrote that we all want beauty for the refreshment of our souls, and she sought to provide it in the homes, the affordable homes, she provided for working people. You can see some of them here in South London. Our early 20th century planning legislation did likewise. You can see it in the parliamentary debates that brought it forward. But then somehow mid-century we collectively dropped it as a shared aim for the places we create and the way we aspire to live. And this isn't normal, it is new that we don't talk in these terms. I would argue we now need to reinvigorate the living tradition of placemaking. That does not necessarily mean creating a house which looks as if it was built in 1820, though nor should it mean that you cannot. But it does mean understanding the qualities of street, of building, of height, and of facade, which make places popular and homely. We all need our home, our place, as we make our way through the world. Okay, that's not the slide I was expecting either, but I'm coming to that. Joanna is coming, I promise. They've moved my slides, it's very naughty of them. British architecture can create and steward some of the world's best places, but it's too rare, and we must do so more often for the betterment of our neighbours, the advancement of our industry, and the delicacy with which we tread upon the planet. I'm delighted that we can discuss that today. Thank you all very much for inviting me, and as you got a sneak preview, I'm delighted to hand you over to the next speaker, with whom it's a great joy to work, Joanna Waverley. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.